Good morning. Welcome to our Friday the 13th webinar. We started doing Friday the 13th webinars a few years ago, partly because, well, lots of people associate Friday the 13th with bad luck and superstitions and the need to be cautious. And in the world of HR, there are things we need to be wary of and watchful for. So today is no different. We want to talk about a few HR related items that we advise our own consultants and our own clients to be mindful of and to focus some of their attention on in the coming year. So thank you for joining us. My name is Dan Oakland. I'm the founder of Alternative HR. Joining me this morning is going to be Karen DeLang. Karen is a senior HR consultant, and she is our director of operations. So she manages a lot of our day-to-day operations. I've had the pleasure of working with Karen for almost 12 years. Prior to that, Karen managed human resources in the nonprofit sector, and before that worked in recruiting and HR with a Fortune 500 company. I'm going to start out and then I'm going to turn things over to Karen, and then I'll come back and wrap up. But first, let me give you a bit of context. Alternative HR is an outsourced HR provider. We assist, or we can assist our clients with everything in the life cycle of their employees, from the time they start to the time they leave their employment and everything in between. And the reason we're in business really is because only about 5% of the largest employers throughout the United States are large enough to justify having a full-time HR professional on their team. The other 95% of employers still have to hire and train and lead and compensate their people and compete with the larger employees. So we work primarily with the 95% of employers that do not have HR on staff, but they need some support and services. Think about the last 2 to 3 years. We came out of a pandemic, out of shutdowns, out of divisive elections, out of immigration issues and economic issues and inflation and energy concerns, supply chain concerns. Still dealing with foreign policy crisis with China and Russia and Ukraine. And we came out of a very tight, or we're coming out of a very tight labor market, changing workforce in terms of both expectations and willingness. And while COVID has settled down, it's not gone away completely, and none of these other issues have really been resolved. So we go into 2023 with a mix of confidence and caution. Confidence because we survived the last 3 years. Confidence because in most cases we've gotten better and smarter in our operations. Confidence because at least here in the Midwest, the business economy remains strong. But there's caution on the other hand, because of the potential rough seas ahead. Finding people is still a struggle. Our employees are struggling more to make ends meet. Their kids are struggling more with school issues, mental health issues. Borrowing money is more expensive. Credit cards are getting maxed out again. And on the business side, regulations continue to expand, which gives us less room to maneuver, gives us a little more regulations to deal with. What we want to look at today are really 3 initiatives, 3 areas of focus that we think are important no matter what your business goals are for the year. Specifically, we're going to talk a bit about recruiting and retention and relating to your people. And then I want to look at a few of the things on the horizon that we also need to keep an eye on, things that are coming down in the HR management sector. So first, let me introduce Karen DeLang and have her come on and visit with you for a bit, and then I'll come back.
We're in the same room. We're just going to swap places back and forth. It does make things a bit easier for us. So like, let me see. Like Dan said, I'm going to focus a little bit on the hiring piece of it to start with. You know, even though the economy is slowing just slightly right now, we've seen some positive changes in the unemployment numbers, in the inflation seems to be hopefully slowing down just a little bit. 60% of businesses still expect to grow in 2023. Again, this is a great sign for the economy. But of that, because we're already in a kind of a talent acquisition shortage, we expect that will continue to be a top challenge for this next year. I mean, everywhere we look, businesses are already trying to hire, and when they aren't able to hire, they kind of make some changes to the way they run their business. You know, we've all seen maybe long lead times when we're trying to get maybe work done at our house, or we're trying to order something and there's a supply shortage. But also there's just a shortage of workers. Sometimes restaurants are closing their lobbies. I was in Pierre not that long ago, and I couldn't find any fast food restaurants that had a lobby open. So in some cases, employers, what they do to combat that, they raise their wages, but there's an end to that always. There's not every business has that luxury. So we need to really look at what we can do to compete. It's really become a candidate-driven market. I mean, again, the talent shortages, 69% of employers report having a difficult time filling their jobs. And so as we go through this, we need to think about it. Again, this is when there's a shortage of houses, it becomes, you know, the buyers are they have to pay more. Those who own houses are more. And the same thing here, when there's a shortage of workers, we have to pay them. We're competing with other employers for those same people. The November 2022 unemployment rate for South Dakota specifically is 2.4. That's actually a little bit lower. I'm sorry, a little bit better than it was. It's been a little, figure out which direction. 2.3 is what it was before, and it was that for a long time. This is actually, we have a higher unemployment rate, lower unemployment rate, less people that are looking for jobs now than we did in March of 2020, so just before. So we're back up to pre-COVID levels on that. Specifically in South Dakota, 17,195 jobs. This is just on Indeed for the state of South Dakota. This is not every job, but this is just how many all over. Some of these jobs are multiple, but even so, you can see the gap between, you know, how many are unemployed and potentially looking for jobs and how many jobs are potentially open. That gap continues to be out there. The December unemployment rates are not out yet. I looked even this morning. They'll come out soon, but they're not out yet. Obviously, locally, the one company that we all kind of scared us, you know, pre-COVID, and then as they come on is Amazon. It's kind of the new big player in this area. October 2020, they had 80 employees locally. They want to be to 1,500 by March of 2023. That's just a couple of months away. I read one time how many, I think it was 100 employees a day that they were looking to hire. Well, they can't hire that many, but they were just ramping it up. They offer some things that are interesting to note. They have benefits on day one. So again, this is what your competition is doing. They offer college tuition for employees after they've been there 90 days. So I don't know, that may perk the ears of some of those parents that are out there going, oh, I need to send my child to Amazon to work. They pay anywhere from $16 to $18.40 an hour. Their website actually says that they start pay at 19, and that for most of their positions, and they do 22 hours for shift work. The ones I found for South Dakota or Sioux Falls specifically were $16 to $18.40. They have a sign-on bonus of $3,000. The other thing they do, I had gone to a workshop that the HR person from Amazon had done. They have a very flexible work shift. So on their website, they have 151 shifts available for the fulfillment center warehouse associate. So one particular position, they are very, very flexible on what works for you, what days, what times. But again, that's just kind of your competition. So keep that in mind. There's some new threats to hiring to think about. This actually I just read that just recently, but some things that I hadn't heard of, or terms I hadn't heard of. One of them is career cushioning. And that's when employees have a fear of recession. So what they do, they reach out to their network, they kind of find out what's out there. It's kind of along the dating scene of what's out there, just in case their employer decides to do some layoffs. They want to make sure those networks or they've made those contacts recently. And what you can do to combat that is just maybe, again, reassure them that you're not, planning to do any layoffs. Let them know how strong your organization is. The micro interviewing, what that is that long hiring process, really slow decisions. And we've seen that here too, where we've had some really good candidates, people that want to move to South Dakota. The employers are just slow at making a decision, and then they lose them because they're going to go somewhere else. That doesn't mean a quick process. Make sure your process is good, but don't be slow on your decisions and drag them out. They'll go somewhere else. The quiet hiring, that's a little different than the quiet quitting. That's where the employees put in all the extra work, and maybe maybe they even get promoted, but the employers are not communicating very well what needs to happen to succeed in a company. And so make sure that when you're giving those promotions and recognizing people for their hard work, that you're not quiet about it. Communicate that. Skills gap, again, that continues to be a problem. So to combat that, you should make sure you're widening your talent pool and maybe upskilling or reskilling your current workforce. And then talent shortage, that just continues to be an issue, especially in the skilled fields and especially in things like technology and things like that. So really, it's to go back to the basics as we go through and remember that it's a candidate-driven market. Recruiting is truly all about marketing. It's not just putting it out there and passively hoping that people will apply for it. You need to actively market your jobs. Remember, you're competing with all of the other organizations that are looking for in the same pool of applicants. So just a couple of things we're going to touch on, and I'm going to try to be brief on, because this is all basic things for HR. So I'll try to go through them. Just if nothing else, take a step back this year and look at your process. And see how you're doing with fresh eyes. So make sure your jobs are posted in multiple places. Needs to be there for just the pool that we're in right now. If you don't have an applicant tracking system or an ATS, feel free to contact us. So that is a way for you to funnel all your application and post to multiple places all at once. Funnels all your applications into kind of one place to review them, keeps things organized, makes you more efficient. But mainly it gets the jobs out to all the multiple job boards, gives you that online presence. You have to have that in today's market. Surprising to me, especially as we help some of the organizations that are maybe outside of the immediate area, that a lot of organizations don't have that online presence. Absolutely a must have. We're finding that sometimes people are looking for jobs while they're in the bathroom at their current jobs. Definitely a must have on it. It says 60% of job seekers use online job boards, and that's just a huge number. They still find jobs elsewhere, but it's a large amount of people that are using the job boards. I read somewhere that online, on average, job seekers spend about 11 hours a week looking on employment sites for jobs. To me, 11 hours a week is a lot. If you figure even a 5-day work week, that's more than 2 hours after your regular job that you're looking for jobs. That's a lot. They use up to 16 different sources, and some of the best searches, job sites that people use or are recommended to use include Indeed, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Google for Jobs, Career Builder, Monster. These are all names we know. Simply Hired, ZipRecruiter, LinkUp. And then I thought this one was interesting. Also, US News job search site. I'm like, oh, never heard of that. And then I looked at the source. Oh, this US News jobs. So, oh, they're just promoting themselves. So I don't know. But all of the other ones, definitely, I think those are great sources, as well as the job works boards, the unemployment boards for each particular state. So when you're out there, again, make sure people can find their jobs easily. It's posted, you're using ATS, you have an online presence, and then make sure your career page is easy to find. It's amazing to me, sometimes when we are working with clients, I'll try to find their career page and you search all over, they've got it, maybe, not always, but it's hard to find. So make it easy to find. I'm going to show you a website that is from one of my companies, organizations here locally that is near and dear to my heart and has been for a long time. So when I was looking for a good example of a website that does it right, I knew that I could go to theirs. I did ask permission, and so a shout out to BX. They are a local construction company out of Del Rapids. They are always on the cutting edge of things. They have a great website. So I'm just going to point out some things that they do well that you might think about for your own organization. So first of all, this is just a snip. So it's not the entire website. But on their front page, this is where you come into their page. if you'll notice, they over here have it right away, a work for BX. So there's a tab immediately present, set apart from everything else that you can find on it. So I gotta get my cursor back here, hang on. And then if you click on that, it's going to bring you to their next, this is their employment page. So right up at the top, they have this work for BX. This is, I believe, up there all the time. It's a way to connect. Maybe you're not interested in the current jobs that they have, or maybe they don't have jobs right now. You can connect with them and stay in touch with them. They have a video that shows why it's a great place to work and what work is like there. They have all their job opportunities listed in easy to see places. They've also got them all translated into Spanish because their construction, they have a large Hispanic workforce. They've got testimonials from the employees, current employees down there. Again, great things. They talk about their culture, which I didn't do. You can scroll down and see more of their career page. Just a really great career page. Then if you click on the job itself, they make it really easy to apply. So the apply for this job is way up at the top. They do use an applicant tracking system. They use Bamboo HR. If you don't have one, that's a good HRIS system to use, because with it, you can apply it, you can post it to your website easily, you can share with some of the other social media easily. It has the compensation very upfront and center. And I just want to say, if you aren't putting compensation on your job postings, you really need to start doing that. And if you don't do it, Indeed does it for you, and they're going to give a rate that may or may not be what you want to pay for your employees. So BX just has it front and center. If you're not proud of what you're paying, or if you're worried about what your current employees are paying or what they're going to think about employees, okay, you have other issues, you can talk to us. We'll help you do a compensation survey. We'll help you, navigate some of those waters about getting pay equity amongst your employees and bring people up where there are. But they're talking about it anyway. I helped my son, he was applying for a job. Now this has now been a month or two ago. But we just skip over the ones that don't have the pay. He knows what he wants to earn, and if it isn't on there, he's not going to apply. And you don't know who you're missing by not having it on there. Some of the other things they do is they keep it very simple. So it's very streamlined. Obviously there's more that this job does, but this is the basics of what needs to happen for that position. Oh, that person. And so they keep it up front and center with where they're going to go. Oops, I got to go to the right page. And then this is the second, if you scroll down on that one, they've got, if you notice, here's their job responsibilities and experience and requirements. They've got their benefits listed out and some really great benefits. Their benefits actually exceed the number of requirements for the job. So just a really great job on that. And then down at the bottom, they're doing a sign-on bonus and a referral bonus. So all of those things, just really great things to keep in mind. Take a look at your own website, your own career page, and say, what am I doing? What am I doing? What can I change? So again, post in multiple places, ATS, online presence, career page, and then make the application process easy and make it mobile friendly. Like I said, sometimes what we're finding is people are applying for jobs in the bathroom of their current job. They don't have a desktop. They're in there on their phone, or they're at home. They're sitting in front of the TV. They're watching football. Or they're looking at jobs. They want to apply right then. Keep it easy. So I'm going to go back to BX again. They're doing a great job on this. So a couple things on this. So they've got some required fields, but right up at the top, this is what I want to just point out. At the top of the application is a place to put the resume. I was looking for examples of career pages, and I'm like, well, there's no way. If you're on your phone, you don't want to type in all of the information. And so even if sometimes when you're using an ATS, they put that at the bottom. So by the time the person gets down to, oh, I can upload a resume, they've already put all that in or skipped. They don't even see it there. So that should be up at the top of your application process so they can upload the resume. Most people have them anymore. If they don't, they still fill it in, but that way they can get it out. And because everything is online anymore, that's why most people have them. They don't want to sit there and type the same thing over and over and over. So just keep that very simple. And then the submit application wait on there. So that's just a little bit about the application process. As you post, a couple things to keep in mind. Make sure obviously that you have an updated job description, that you know what you're looking for, that you are attracting the right people. Make sure it's a job post. So many times we see a job description, long, boring, not enticing as the job that's what's posted as a way to attract candidates. That's not attractive. A job post, and remember, this is marketing. When you're recruiting, you're actually marketing your company. So you want to make sure your job post is something that would be compelling, that people want to come and work for you. Also, when you're out there, remember that they are being searched by a computer. So you'll want to have a title that makes sense. Don't use something like rock star bookkeeper, because where does the computer file that? Are they a bookkeeper, or are you looking for a rock star? So make sure that you have a title that makes sense. The title should be fairly standard. Keep your posting short. Again, if you look at BX, it had all the highlights in it, and then you can do and more, whatever. And then be original, just make it enticing. Don't just be that long, boring sort of thing. As you're looking for applicants, you probably want to think outside the box a bit. So not just your standard, they're going to come to me, I'm going to put it out, and I'm going to have lots of people coming. That doesn't always happen anymore. So look at people that are currently working, whether you're looking on LinkedIn or people that in your network or whatever it is. Reach out to them, say, hey, I have this job. Would you be interested? Where are you at in your job? Talk to them, start doing that, that dating thing that we talked about, that employees are doing. Look for people that have skills that maybe don't match exactly, but are close, that you can train on. The untapped market, one thing with the economy going down, for instance, I talked to somebody the other day that was planning to retire this year, and now he said, I'm going to push that off a bit. I'm not sure when I'm going to do that. So there are people, and I've also heard the other side, where people who have retired who want to pick up some extra money, because again, the economy, it affected 401k plans, and they were like, I can still work, so I'm going to go back. So think about some of those that maybe you would have discounted. Who is out there? And then be flexible. That 151 shifts that they have at Amazon, they're very flexible. So think about it. Do they really have to come in to work every day? Or can you do a hybrid remote? Can you shift the hours, whatever it is? And then look inside the box. Who do you have currently? So referrals from current employees, they already know your culture. They're probably only going to refer people that are fit, because it reflects back on them. So current employees are a great source. I think it says 20% of companies, regardless of their size, receive over 20% of their hires from referrals. So don't overlook that. Former employees, sometimes they've left and then said, grass is not always greener. Don't lose touch with them. And then think about either promoting employees or transferring employees. So that's the recruiting piece, because that's going to be a big thing in 2023. That will be continue to be something that we focus on. But the number one recruiting tip is keep the people that you have, keep them happy, keep them, figure it out. Don't be trying to rehire, because they're not necessarily out there. Turnover obviously is costly. Turnover is just continued to be something that we see over and over. And so what is it and why is it? When you think about turnover, there's a loss of organization knowledge. Think of all the things that you lose when you have a good employee, a high performer that leaves. You lose all that knowledge. Even if it's a low performer, you have the interruption of service, which is, you've got to you now have a position that's vacant. You got to find somebody, train somebody, get them in. It takes a little bit of time. There's that lag time in there. The turnover leads to more turnover. I remember way back, this is way back, but everybody at I had a great job. I loved my job. And, but everybody around me was quitting. And I'm like, wonder what I'm missing, wonder what's out there. And, it just kind of, and I did end up leaving. I left. And then I heard about more people that were leaving. And then I'm like, well, I didn't dislike my job, but it was kind of like, that fear of missing out, something better out there. And they talk about more pay or whatever. Obviously, when people leave, you have lower morale. People are, again, why is everyone leaving? What am I missing? They lose their friend, whatever it is. And then of course, lost efficiency. So you do want to be careful about that. This poll was from January 2022. It said 4.25 million people quit their jobs in January 2022 across the United States, which was 3.3, there was 3.3 million in 2021. So there was an increase from 2021 to 2022. And they said that's 21% of Americans that took a new job in the previous 12 months. Again, this is a year ago. But also 40% of turnover happens within the first year that they're with an organization. So it's amazing. So just because you've hired them doesn't mean they're going to stay. You need to really keep on top of those new hires, especially. And we see it too. Most of the turnover, we do track turnover for all of our organizations. And most of the turnover happens within the first 6 months. So you want to be on top of that. When we looked at why they quit, most employee turnover is preventable, 75%. The reasons, 18% might be career related. They're looking for growth, achievement, security, make sure you have a good career plan. 10.5 are looking for work-life balance. So, they want to travel more, they want to have hybrid, whatever. Some of them is 10% is job related. So they want to have manageable work that they can enjoy. 7.8% was manager related. So having a good relationship with your boss is very important. 7.7% is environment. So your physical and cultural surroundings, what does it look like to work there? And then 7% on rewards. What's your compensation and benefits plan look like? The reasons why they would stay, again, 23% said they would stay for more work-life balance, 21% for recognition, 19% is compensation. It's still high. If you are unsure about where you're paying, again, feel free to reach out. We do wage analysis. Probably one of our top requests in this last year is helping organizations figure out if they're paying right. And we've got some great tools for that. So we've done a lot of that for organizations locally this last year. And then again, the good relationship with their managers, that would help them stay. So take a look at those things. Let's see, I'm not getting my clicker back. So what can you do? Again, when I looked at who was on this call, a lot of it is HR. We've got a lot of HR folks, not all, but so sometimes this is a little bit of preaching to the choir. But so these are things that just, again, to remember. Let's see if I got one more. So appreciation, pay attention to what's important to people. I read somewhere that it would take, in order to lure away an employee to another company, if they have a good manager, it would take a 20% pay raise. I'm going to say that again. So if you have a good manager, it would take 20% more in pay for another company to take that good employee away. The other side of it, again, that turnover leads to turnover. It says more than 1/3 of employees have been encouraged to quit their job by a coworker. Somebody went somewhere else and they recruited their person away. So it really is important that you're focusing on some of these tools for retention. Oops, and one more. And this one, we talked to our own group this last week and said, what do you see in retention? What works, what doesn't, and what kind of ideas do you have? And just some really good feedback from that. One that all of these I thought were like, oh yeah, I sometimes forget that, but what's the vision? Retention is everyone's responsibility, and I can't remember how many times you'll be all excited, you'll get a new person come in, and then I want to just say the old guys, the current employees in the department, they put them through some sort of initiation period or whatever, or they don't learn their names because turnover is so much, they just don't adopt them in, and people get burned out on new people. But to help them see what the vision is look, this is what we're trying to do. Here's what our turnover numbers are. Here's where we want it to be. We don't want to have you always having to train new people as they come in. We want people to know what they are doing. So share the turnover numbers with them. Help them understand that they are responsible. It's HR and it's the manager, but it's also the coworkers. Get them involved in, let's get this person, acclimated, because we're excited about this person. So be nice, play nice. Maybe have a welcome program, something that's a little bit more, I think we probably often do. So-and-so is new, here's what they came from, here's maybe their picture. If you're not doing that, you should. A welcome program is a little bit more than that. Make them feel part of it. Maybe you've got some logoware that you share with them, right off. They get that pride of, they're excited. Remember, new employees come in, they just got a new job. This is really exciting. It's also a little bit like middle schoolers going to a new school and trying to find a place at the lunchroom. So help them make that transition. Yes, they're excited, but a little bit of that is anxiety. how do you make this easy for them when they come in? So a welcome program, again, is make a little hoopla about it. Maybe think about a buddy system. So, and those can change because personalities don't always match. So different buddies that they kind of team up with. And it's a way to recognize current employees too, by having them a little bit of extra responsibility and having them connect. And then give that regular feedback. Don't just wait for the 6 months or, when something is negative. Right off the bat. And again, HR, we can do it formally, that 30 or 60-day stay interview, but also informally. Make sure that if they're doing something right, they don't know, they're new. So make sure your supervisors are saying, hey, great job. I saw what you did, whatever. And boy, you're really picking that up, or, something, whatever it is. Help them give that regular feedback on what they're doing. And then again, turnover is high in that first 6 months. So watch for off performance. So someone who was doing a good job suddenly isn't. Find out what's going on. Maybe someone that they were friends with quit. Maybe there's personal stuff going on. Don't just assume that suddenly they're going to quit. Now we need to discipline them for their performance. Help them a little bit, sit down and have a conversation with them, especially if they're new, find out what's going on. But that's with every employee, find out what's going on with it. So again, what I talked about a little bit is recruiting. It's the top thing that you want to do. The top recruiting tip is to retain the people that you have. And the next one is just to build that relationship in your culture to help retain. And then tip number 3 is, again, it kind of circles back. So at this point, I'm going to circle back and switch this over to Dan and let him take over from here. So thank you.
All right, as we continue on, and I want to follow up on a couple things. Karen was talking a little bit about turnover, and I think we all recognize not all turnover is bad. Once in a while, you have somebody that needs to be invited out of the organization. But it's important for you to know your turnover. And I ask a lot of business owners if they know what percent or what their turnover rate is. And a lot of them don't know that number. You should know that number. You should know what your turnover is. You should know when it occurs mostly. A lot of times turnover occurs during in that first year. A lot of times it's in the first 90 days. Somebody gets in and realizes this isn't the job you sold me, or this isn't the job I thought it was. The other thing we look at turnover on is, and I'll look at, was this turnover a high performer or a low performer? Because that makes a big difference. If I can trade off a low performer for a high performer, that's going to be a net gain for us. If I trade off a high performer for somebody that I don't know, that's a net loss. So look at your turnover. It's important to do that. The other thing is, when we go into, a lot of times we're able to lower turnover in companies by the things we're implementing. It's a net gain, a financial gain. Doesn't always show up on the profit loss statement, but when you can spend less time recruiting and interviewing and training, that's money that goes to the bottom line. Let's keep moving forward, because one of the things I want to talk about is on the relationship side of things. Karen talked about recruiting and retention. And when I talk about relating, I think of the relationships we build with our people. That's what sets the tone in our business. That's what establishes our environment and creates our culture. We think of relations, in a family, we're joined by blood or common experience or emotion. We have relationships with lots of people in our life. In the workplace, it's important to develop those relationships. And sometimes business people, we're so focused on the profits, the bottom line, the operations, the sales, that we don't focus some attention on relationships. So let's look at some of the things that relationships shape for us. It really shapes the environment in which we work. Karen and my ability to sit down and talk about different aspects or different clients, different situations, helps determine the environment in which we can work. It helps determine our emotions and attitudes toward coming to work. It really shapes the culture, the values, the behaviors we have as an organization. Now, a lot of times when we start working with an organization, with a business, I can ask for a description of an organization's culture. And I usually do that with the owner or in the executive office or the boardroom. But that's always a distorted view. In fact, my view of our organization culture, well, let's just say the better description is to find out what our people say about it. So the true picture is found by spending time on the work floor, in the break room, by the water cooler, than it is talking to the CEO, talking to the owner. That's the indicators of your culture. Part of it's your turnover. Part of it's engagement of your people, their satisfaction. Some of it's you can tell by referrals from your employees. Are they referring people? Are they encouraging people to come to your organization? Part of it's your reputation as an employer. Just as an aside, if you've never, a lot of times employers don't realize that on Glassdoor, which is one of the job search sites, very frequently you have referrals or maybe a 1-star rating, maybe a 5-star ratings. Sometimes your employers have, or your employees or past employees have rated you as an employer. Sometimes that's positive, sometimes it's not. It's important to know how your people view you as an organization. How you relate to your people shows up in your policies. It shows up in your practices. It shows up in your compensation and benefits, in your training. It shows up in your leadership style, in your day-to-day interactions. So if there are issues with your culture, it always starts with ownership and management and works outward from there. So we've talked a bit about recruiting, about retention, about relationships, and no matter what's on the horizon, no matter what your goals for the year, in my mind, the keys to navigating through all of those business objectives, whether it's marketing or operational goals or service goals or sales goals or new product and service launches or your profit goals, all of that success, it's your success in recruiting and retaining and relating with your people that are going to accomplish those goals. So understanding that, I do want to turn to for a couple minutes and look briefly at a few other things on the horizon in 2023 and beyond. And then I want to spend a couple minutes talking about how we can support your efforts to find and keep great people and to continue to create that environment where your people can excel. So a few of the things that are coming. And one of the things I want to talk briefly about is just changing worker expectations. We've seen that a lot in the last few years with the pandemic. And some of you having people work from home works, some of you doesn't. We know a manufacturing facility, you can't take the equipment home, you can't do some of those things there. A UPS delivery driver has to get in the truck and go out. So there are certainly jobs, but workers have changed their expectations. We can talk about boomers and millennials and Gen Z and all of the different generations wanting different things. But some of the things that have changed that you've seen is perhaps more demand for remote work or more ability. Some companies have resisted that, some have embraced it. But we've had workers who want more of it, who inquire about it. Flexible scheduling is something that we see more and more people asking for. One of the things we see a need for is professional development. And when the economy gets tough, training and development is one of the things that gets easily set aside. We can pay for that later. We can do that next year, but that sometimes suffers. And leadership development is also one of those things that tends to suffer. During the pandemic, our focus was on what do we do now? And it wasn't necessarily on our people and our relationships. And so that's important. We work with a lot of organizations, and you know as well as I do that when you promote somebody to a supervisory position, very frequently you promoted them because they were a great worker. problem is that them being a great worker, those skills don't necessarily translate to supervisory skills, to leadership skills, to communicating expectations, to helping somebody develop somebody else. So those are some things. And employees want somebody who's going to guide them, coach them, develop them. The connection, the communication is also critical. You know, I think of, I've been in the workplace a long time. We've added a lot of ways to communicate poorly. You know, we can miscommunicate now face to face. We can also miscommunicate via text, via email. And so we have all these ways of communication, but our communication hasn't always improved because of it. What else is coming? In terms of pay transparency, I want to talk about that a little bit. And Karen talked a little bit about that in terms of job posting. There are, I think, 7 states in the United States now that require you to post a pay range or the pay for the position. California, Colorado, New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut, I'm not sure who else, but that's going to be a push. We're going to see more and more states doing that. And that's partly what's prompted Indeed, because they're doing business in all of those states. So that's why they're posting a pay rate. So if you don't tell them what pay rate you want, they're going to estimate, they're going to put it out there. What we find is up to 40 to 50% more response, though, when you do post a pay range. Now, if it's a pay range that's not competitive, yeah, you're probably not going to see that response. But you need to start posting pay rates. And that's something business owners and in the past, HR folks, we've been resistant to do that because we want people to tell us what you're making and maybe I can come in a little bit above that. So increased pressure to reduce gender and racial pay gaps. Now, we're not seeing that in South Dakota, in the Midwest as much, but nationally, there is more, and that's going to become a bigger issue all the time. And so it's important for us to be thinking about that. And when we work with our clients on setting up pay ranges and looking at compensation, we want to be mindful of what that's doing. So growing requirements to report pay data. Again, that doesn't affect us here, but there are states, California is one, there are other states considering this, asking employers to report their pay data, their gender data, their racial makeup, so that they can do some analysis of whether they are paying fairly. Be aware that that's on the horizon. There's pressure for that. What else is coming? We see lots of things in the news in diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's big business. But there's social and political pressure for employees to do more. You know, over the past, most of us, we've always had equal employment opportunity statements that we're not going to discriminate. And people follow that fairly closely, are pretty good about that. But let's face it, that is a fairly reactive way. It's not proactive. It's not going out and trying to make our workforce more inclusive, more diverse. There's continued to be pressure on that. There's an emphasis, and if you read many articles, you see emphasis on the business case for diversity, not just the moral case, because there are studies that show that companies with racial, gender, age diversity tend to be more creative, more productive, more profitable. So growing requirements, again, to report DEI activity. That's going to be a continued pressure that we see. Another place where to focus attention, or just to summarize a little bit, the recruit, retain, relate, what we've talked about, but the pay, the posting, pay ranges, pay practices, remote work, the continued pressure, training for our supervisors and managers, and of course the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Reading an article recently from one of the HR, I think it was HR Morning, But they were referring a study, in an executive study from global chief HR officers, as far as what they thought the top issues or emerging issues were. Well, remote work was one, pay transparency was one, diversity, and the recruiting and retention of our people. So it's not just us looking at these things as primary issues we need to keep at and keep looking at. We used to think that when there's for example, we've got Democrats have a slight edge in the Senate, Republicans a slight edge in the House. And we used to think when that happens, there's probably not much emerging legislation coming. But the other thing we've seen in the last few presidential terms, a lot more things are done by presidential or executive order than they are through the legislature. And so there's pressure now to do away with non-compete agreements. And some of that is being looked at in the courts. Some of that I anticipate we'll see more in terms of executive decisions. Those are things we need to keep an eye on. So let me switch a little bit. We've talked about some of these things coming up. I do want to just spend 30 or 60 seconds talking about some of the services we have, how they might be able to help you. We kind of divide our services into 4 areas. Our HR on demand is our subscription service. You get info, you get tools, you get up to an hour each month of phone or email consultation. Really designed for very small customers and or some who just need some additional support. Our fractional and interim HR, where we become your part-time HR manager, consultant, advisor on an ongoing basis. Our HR solutions, which really is a whole variety of things, from helping you with recruiting. It's as needed support, like I say, with recruiting, with a handbook, with a policy, with job descriptions, with compliance, with best practices. When you have that performance issue and you don't know quite how to handle that employee or that situation, we'd be glad to sit down and talk through and see if we can help with that. Our training and coaching, the specific areas that we have there, supervision and leadership. Our respect at work training is something we've developed over the last few years that's really focused on harassment, discrimination, diversity, inclusion, but it really focuses on respect, how we treat one another, how we interact, how we communicate. We also do training on communications in the workplace. Our prioritized leader training is really focused on frontline coaching, mid-level coaching, department heads, and executives. And it tends to be more one-on-one and or small group, facilitating that coaching. So just a little bit more. Our team, we have team members in South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota. We've got one in Iowa, one in Minnesota. Most of us are in South Dakota. We just added somebody in Rapid City because we have a growing number of calls in that region. And while most of our clients are in South Dakota, many have locations and employees in a number of other states. So we can help navigate multi-state laws. We're working on handbooks, for example, and policies. We're frequently having to research a number of state laws to find that information. So anyway, Karen and I want to thank you for tuning in today. Okay, Karen says we have a question. Are you going to answer it?
Yeah, the question is, what's the trend for pay increases in 2023? And I would like to know that, what the crystal ball is. Yeah. Oh, Dan says it's about 5. I had heard it actually just recently too, that it was going to be a little slower, that we're seeing a little slower than what we did last year. And that has to do with the inflation rate. But go ahead, I'll let you talk on it.
So the things I've seen were about 5%, but you're right. Newest inflation numbers show it's maybe a little bit less this month than last month, it's trending down a bit. So I think that pressure will be down. So it may be more in the 4 to 5%. Or a little lower, but it's going to be continued pressure. And it's what it causes. Obviously, it causes angst because you got to figure your budget if you can do that. But there are different ways to look at that, whether you increase base wage, whether you increase salary, whether you do more in bonus. Some companies I've seen do instead of doing a increase this year, they're doing a smaller increase, but they are doing a year-end bonus to kind of offset that. So there are some different ideas that different companies have looked at. So, but again, that compensation is one of the things that with the pressure the last couple years, done a lot more projects dealing with compensation. We have access to what we think is some of the best compensation information in the country. We partnered with a company called Economic Research Institute. And so we're able to access compensation information from 10 to 12,000 different positions in over 1,000 different industries and job categories. So it's also that information we get is updated on a quarterly basis. So it's the problem you get sometimes by looking at other wage data or even Department of Labor wage data is it's sometimes reported several months ago. And so it can be anywhere from 12 to 24 months old. So you've got to figure out what to do with that. So the other thing that we see a lot more questions on and asking for is total comp statements. That's something we can also help you with for your people. That's a great tool to help you sit down with your people to show them what all of your compensation, not just their pay, but their benefits and some of those things. So that's just something, if you ever want to take a look at that, we'd be happy to visit with you. Anyway, we want to thank you for tuning in today. If you do have specific questions about what we've talked about or any other HR related issues that you've been thinking about, that you're concerned about, that you're losing sleep over, give us a call or shoot us an email. But thank you. Have a wonderful Friday the 13th.